Oh my God. I'm so excited to be speaking to this person. It feels like speaking to the future president of the world. That's how I see you, you know? And like I'm not even sure how I don't even try to introduce people, but like if I was to try and introduce you, I'd have no idea where to even start. So please tell us who you are. Who are you?
Yeah, so future president of the world, obviously. It's on my vision board, but I haven't told anybody about that yet. Um, so my name is Silja Litvin. I'm half American, half German, and I am a clinical psychologist with my expertise being in depression and anxiety. But at the moment, I'm not actually practicing. I have a couple of pro bono clients, but I'm mostly focused on my mental health startup. So we design evidence-based and safe mobile mental health games that teach young adults anywhere between, let's say, 16 and 35, the psychological skills that they need to be able to deal with emotional and mental stressors. So it's prevention and early intervention, and we're the only game in the NHS app library. So that is what keeps me going 24/7.
So how is it going with regards to your startup now compared to sort of where you wanted it to be, or perhaps even expected, and sort of how do you think it's going to pan out going forward?
Well, I kind of feel a little bit bad when saying these things. It's very bittersweet right now because I think the world is really opening up to the idea that mental health isn't something that, is kind of like a hobby, but is actually an essential part of everybody's life. Everybody has it, and it will be subject in about 46% of the population's life at one point or the other. And we cannot ignore that anymore. And this pandemic forcing mental health in our faces, I think, is a wake up call that on the long run will help a lot of suffering to be reduced because people are just waking up to it. So we have had a huge boost in downloads. Like our organic downloads went up by 160%, and we actually responded to that by unlocking the game completely for free because we've seen so many people have been economically impacted by it. And this is not a time to make money. This is a time to help people and raise awareness. So it's, on one hand, it's bad. On the other hand, it's a great opportunity and a challenge to really commence whatever is happening with mental health.
So I found myself in a sort of very strange position in life because come from a formal background of studying sciences, computer science, maths, chemistry, with a little bit of sprinkle of music, and 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 also management science, as my cat meows. Okay,
Very
Flint,
vocal.
calm down. It's okay. Chill out. Uh, yeah, it's like he's very good at this. Like I've learned this thing that like cats have developed their meow to. I don't know if you've learned this or seen
Yeah.
this. To like their meow is emulating the sound of a crying baby. So it like
Yeah.
immediately catches
Yeah.
attention. It's like, oh
Yeah.
God, Flint is about to like he needs feeding, and so and here this is kind of like a perfect segue into having moved from computer sciences and a kind of raw, kind of mechanical things into user experience design, I started realizing that psychology plays like 95% role in
Mm-hmm.
pretty much like everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I just found myself first kind of dipping a toe in some sort of little stream. And then I was like sort of about to take off into a river. And now I feel like I'm swimming in the ocean of psychological kind of considerations. So, and I realize we all, as you said, we all have mental health or we have minds. But like, how does one go about understanding themselves these days?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a huge question, I know, but let's kind
Yeah.
of dip our toes into that a
Yeah.
little bit.
May I take a little bit of a detour and kind of like
Yes.
answer the part that your
Yeah.
your own discovery of
Hmm.
psychology and technology is exactly what I experienced the hard way. So we when I started my company, so it was 2016, and when you Googled or you looked in the app stores for mental health apps, there were maybe like 50 that went popped up for the keyword depression. Now we have like 2,500 or something. And there was a lot of evidence that showed that web-based intervention were almost as effective as face-to-face therapy for a certain population, or pharmaceuticals. So I was looking at the trend that is going away from desktop and towards mobile, and we designed an application. We went through a clinical process, and this beautiful application significantly lowers depression and anxiety levels up to the level of an antidepressant with no side effects. And so we're like, yay, we're going to go save the world from depression and anxiety. But our users did not like it, right? And so you have this product that does exactly what it's supposed to do, but you've ignored the psychology of using products and interacting and engagement. So we had to completely pivot away from your typical mood tracking, psychoeducation, little CBT exercises and things like that, all things that work, because you need a very different kind of motivation on the phone than you do when you're sitting in front of your therapist and talking to a person, right? So that is I think the biggest thing in the future of digital therapy is understanding where people come from and what they want and what they're used to and what works the best. And then to your question is about how to get to know yourself, I think, or your mental health needs. Did I understand that correctly?
It's sort of like, I think, and it's going to connect to, social media hygiene that we're also going to discuss. But like, I think a lot of people tend to go to social media nowadays first, in some sense, as almost like a first way to potentially find out, perhaps. And it's even like tricky to know in psychology, like if something's even wrong with the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
how do you even self-diagnose and then like, because some people, like, there's nothing wrong with them per se, but they still want to kind of do better, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
in some sense, they might perceive it as there's something wrong with me because I'm not performing as well as I want to.
Yeah.
Versus some other people are like experiencing anxiety, depression, and sort of like really bad. And they're like, I know something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But, so it's like, I think there's kind of two-pronged situations, like an aspirational psychological resources and maybe desperate kind of psychological resources. How would one go about finding out more? What would you advise?
Well, I think to kind of find the best version of understanding yourself and where you are and your mental well-being and your potential, I guess you have a bunch of different mirrors, for the lack of better saying, that being reflected to you, back to you, who people or society or whatever thinks that you are, right? So, and these will never be completely overlapping, and people will never 100% be able to say this is who I am, because we are changing with every little bit of information we get. We reevaluate, we change, and so we can get very close to understanding who we are, but we will never be exactly on point because we're ever changing. And the opposite of change is, I guess, death. So it's a good thing that we're always changing. And to be able, I think we need to be very careful about whose input we get to kind of reflect back on ourselves, right? So with social media, and this feeds into the social media hygiene, if you are, this is a typical situation, a young girl, you're 16 or something, you're in school, you are just kind of like a little bit of baby fat on you, you're not as tall or as pretty as you think you should be, and you're constantly, this is you comparing yourself to Instagram models, to models, to TikTok, what do you call them, celebrities or something like that. There is such a disparage of where you are and where you think you should be that's going to cause pain, right? Mm-hmm. So to kind of have the psychoeducational knowledge to understand that this discrepancy is not healthy, and to try to find role models that are closer to yourself and that you could actually work into inspiring and being closer to is really, really important. So I go about preaching, whether people want to hear it or not, that social media hygiene is really, really important. So you can't just comb media or social media over and pile it into one box and say it's all bad. I think it's a little bit like sugar. And sometimes sugar is good, it spices up life. It's good to have Mars bars or something like that every once in a while. When you overdose, you can get really sick. You could potentially die, right? So it's the
Yeah,
same
totally.
thing with social media. And to kind of be aware of your emotions and also what you're trying to achieve when you're on social media. So if you're just catching up with friends and you're looking at someone's new kitten and you're exchanging recipes and you're, getting a little bit of news, I think that's a very healthy, very positive way to kind of like experience social media. But if you are following people that either make you feel bad about yourself because they're out of reach and it's just not, you're seeing their highlight reel, you don't see the pictures that they've retouched, or don't show their cellulite, or that their car is leased, or whatever it is that you're looking at, or information or media that makes you angry and feel endangered or attacked, then that is going to actually have a big impact on your well-being. And you can learn to kind of really tailor make and customize your social media feed so that that does not happen.
That's been one of the most important things I've actually done in last, let's say, 5-6 years, where I realized that hold on, like it's on me to train the Facebook algorithm
Yes.
to feed me what I want.
Yes.
Now, there's always that filter bubble
Yeah.
danger there to kind of say, well, it's only feeding me that,
Yeah.
XYZ, whereas ABC is also the case in the world, but I'm not seeing ABC because I want to be kind of blinded to that in a sense, by selecting more of the XYZ. But having said that, what I've noticed is that there's certain people, and some of them are like dear friends of mine. I still love them to bits anyway. They'll always find a doomsday scenario in, like,
Yeah.
no matter what's going on. Like,
Yeah.
we'll be sitting in a beautiful park, sun shining, everything, and they'll be like, but have you heard about that thing? And even if they can't think of something in real world,
Yeah.
they'll pick like a doomsday sci-fi movie and go like, have you seen like the alien resurrection, when the alien is coming out? I was like, dude, I'm just like about to enjoy the sunshine here, and it's like, I don't want to be thinking about alien resurrection.
Yeah.
So but I still love those people because they kind of remind me that one can completely ruin any circumstance should they wish to. But then there's also the other people who maybe sort of like toxic positivity, where it's like, no matter what's happening, it's like, yeah, this is like greatest opportunity in the history. Let's just make money. Let's like do like, so it's like, come on, guys, like we've got to find some sort of balance. So I've always been preferring more balanced kind of thing, but it's tricky to know what balance is. So how do we know what balance is? Tell us, please.
Yes. So first of all, I really think that it depends on your personal experience of well-being, right? Oops, sorry. That you have to kind of just see, what am I experiencing? How does it make me feel? And how has that changed over the last couple of weeks, or whatever you're benchmarking against, right? So typical things that you are red flags about your mental well-being is change. If your sleeping pattern changes, if your mood changes, if your irritability changes, if your eating habits change, because you're living your life, and then something comes from the outside, like be COVID, could it be a breakup, could it just be a phase of your life where you have hormonal change? There's so many factors that have an impact on your mental health. So finding those changes, those patterns, and then saying, is this a good change or is this a bad change? Actually getting up an hour earlier might be a good thing. But if you get up an hour earlier because you're ruminating and you can't stop obsessing about a problem, that's not a good thing, right? So are there changes? How do these changes make me feel? Have these changes been beneficial? What kind of feedback am I getting from trusted sources? And I'm not talking about that toxic friend that says, "Oh, did you gain weight?" I'm talking about someone who really cares about you.
or you're not talking about my mom, who
Yeah,
has been working in an intensive care clinic for 30 years, and no matter
yeah.
what I do and what I look like, she'll be like, son, oh my god, son, you're gonna die.
Okay, yeah. So you might want to kind of like take that with a grain of salt, you know. Um, and then the other thing is also a level of suffering, right? So if you're having like objectively the worst time of your life, but you're still okay, you're fine, right? You have the resilience, the resources to go through that. But you could be having objectively, living in a mansion with your beautiful wife and children and the golden retriever and be suffering from depression. So it is very subjective of your level of pain. And when people ask me, like, when should I seek someone? I say, when you're asking yourself if you should seek help, it's probably already crossed the line that you should seek help. Because, when you're going through your day thinking, la di da, everything's fine, you're not thinking if you should talk to someone, right? So the moment that you feel that you should wonder if you should talk to someone, go make your appointment with your GP, talk to your trusted friend, seek a counselor, whatever, just go and make that first step.
Yeah, and there's no shame about it whatsoever. In
Of course
fact,
not.
it's like the it's becoming kind of somewhat like the sexiest thing to do,
Yeah.
especially for those people who are alert enough, or aware enough to actually do that, even when the times are good, to actually go and get some sort of checkup
Yeah.
done,
Yeah, absolutely.
because I've had so many people reach out to me and go like, I'm 40 grand in debt, like my boyfriend's left me, my house is being repossessed, I've lost my job, or this or that, and it's like, oh god, just like I'm getting like depressed, like hearing that, and then going like, well, and none of that stuff has happened overnight. Like, you don't go 40 grand in debt on your credit card just like
Mm-hmm.
that, right?
No. Yeah.
And so then it's like, but to what extent are you willing to actually face up to the fact
Mm-hmm.
that you've
Mm-hmm.
made that 40 grand debt over 3 years, buying
Mm-hmm.
mostly crap that you didn't ever need, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
that's kind of the root cause there, really. It's
Yeah.
like there's nothing really wrong with your brain physically per se or anything like that. It's just that, like, you've been like
Yeah.
doing bad habits for a long time.
And I like when you say it's nothing wrong with you. It's about your brain or your cognitions choosing strategies to cope with emotions and cognitions that are unbeneficial, right? So it's often like, what's your poison, right? Is it shopping, getting into credit card? Is it alcohol? Is it eating? Is it sex? What is it? Porn, right? So everybody,
All of the above.
all of the above. Oh dear.
uh,
And these are all coping mechanisms that, at one point helped you get your anxiety down or get your mind off something like that, and they helped, but now have overlasted their benefit and are actually causing damage. And that's when you need to go and have a look at your life and say, is this still beneficial?
so, okay, what is the role? And so I want to see, like, I want to prod you a little bit and see
Mm-hmm.
like where you're at. Okay, so what is the role of being in psychology? Because we're human beings, and that word being kind of often gets kind of so sidelined, because a lot of people say like, we're humans after all. But it's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, we're human beings. So what's the role of being in healthy psychology?
Well, before we can go there, you would have to give me your definition of what you understand as being, because
Well,
otherwise I might be talking about something different.
okay. Um, the way I would describe it in a sort of ad hoc, now that you put me on the spot, I would say, thank you very much for that. It's who you are, irrespective of what you have. So you have a body, you have a mind, you have a
Mm-hmm.
house, you have a Flint
Mm-hmm.
cat who's like, meow, right? But I'm not Flint. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not my hand. I
Mm-hmm.
have a hand. But when I strip all of those identities off, like I'm not even a man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even a Bosnian guy who's a refugee from Bosnia, blah, blah, blah. I'm none of that stuff. When I strip off all those kind of memories, who am I? That's the being.
Yeah. So I think that is kind of like a crossover between psychology and philosophy that a lot of us are still kind of wondering about. There is no definite solution for that. You have a lot of different schools that have different hypotheses and different understanding of that. I like to cherry pick. So I'm one of the new generation of psychologists that don't say I'm an analyst or CBT or anything. I like to say I would like to take a little bit of this, a little bit of this, mix it around, and then offer a potential client whatever is best for them in things that I feel that resonate with myself, right?
I
So
have an alternative phrase for cherry picking. It's called methodological pluralism. Sounds fancy.
I would be very careful with that because I probably would mispronounce when I'm on like a panel in front of 1,000 people,
Yeah.
and they're like, she's smart, but she wasn't. Yeah, but yeah, it's good to bring the right terminology to that, and thank you. Um, and for my own understanding, and for kind of like the direction that I would follow, so this is me personally, this is not psychology, is that we are a mix probably of personality traits, which is the closest we get to a reflection of who we are and which is the most stable part of our character. So it's different between personality traits are traits. They will be your whole life. And one of the tests that we measure them with is Big Five, and they have 5 different dimensions: conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, and openness for new experience, right? So the probability that you will be as extroverted as an 80-year-old as you are as a 12-year-old is rather high. That you'll be in the same kind of dimension of an 80-year-old's extroversion. So you won't be jumping around screaming like you would be 12, but for that, it will still kind of stay consistent. So I think personality is as close as we can get to being. And then there's something that we just can't define, which I will just, out of lack of words, call soul. And that is kind of our core awareness. And I think that for a lot of us, that core awareness is embryonic. And the more we work on ourselves and the more we expose ourselves to new ideas and new horizons and different religions and thought theory, the more it opens up and becomes kind of like its true potential. And this is me this is my way of saying. So when you treat someone in psychology and you're coming from the same angle as I am, then you try to pick them up and really see their personality traits, see how they see themselves, and then also try to tap in any potential that there is that they can have. So if I may do a little discourse, there's a book called The Drama of the Gifted Child from Alice Miller.
Okay.
And it's a little bit outdated and everything, but the idea is very beautiful. So the idea is that we all are born with potential, a lot of potential to be the person that we are, which is probably what you're talking about, our being, right? And let's just, if you imagine it as a tree, we have this potential to be this beautiful big oak tree or something like that. But because we're born into a flawed world to flawed caretakers, and we have to adjust our being to the person who's taking care of us, because if the person who's taking care of us doesn't love us and doesn't care for us, then we will die literally as babies, right? So we adjust ourselves to the needs of our caretakers, and caretakers are usually very flawed. So if you have, for example, a mother or a father who is neurotic and needs to be over controlling, maybe your adventurous personality will never blossom because you know you need to contain yourself to not make her anxious. Or maybe it will overextend, because if she's worried about you, you know, or she's focusing all her anxiety on you, then she's not worried about herself, then you're doing her a favor. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So we emerge into the world as this part tree, that has maybe, depending on how flawed your caretaker was,
Yeah.
And then have to actively work on growing the rest of your personality. And I think that's what psychology should be doing. It should be like taking the bugs away that are eating on your tree and then allowing you to discover the space to keep on growing that personality, that potential.
Yeah, so what you were just describing there, it reminds me of, and I can't remember what this art exhibition was, but it was like in the museum where you go through like little sort of rooms that are full of different mirrors that are kind of skewed. Like one is round like this, one is like this, and then one's kind of slightly broken and all that stuff. And each mirror gives you a different reflection of who you are. And some of them you look like really kind of, your head is massive and you're a tiny little body, and then there's like in the other one you look like super like anorexic, like one of those gray aliens, and so on. And then it's like basically what that's kind of teaching you is that no mirror reflection is true reflection of who you are. And that you actually have never seen yourself. And so that's the kind of, so what comes to mind there is one of the things that's kind of helped me really, really loads in my life is to become aware of and have that level of awareness, which is described as metacognition, as in who is the one that's aware of me having the mind. Because whatever you can observe, you can change. So talk to me a little bit about that metacognition, because in some sense, the metacognition is the being that's aware of this kind of guy here. So the being here, according to one of my books that I really kind of call my Bible, is called The Ultimate Secrets of Total Self-Confidence, but it's written by a PhD psychologist, Robert Anthony, who says in one of his little kind of one-liners that I took out, is he says, on the level of being, you are already psychologically perfect and whole. Okay. And so from that meta, so if that's the metacognition, then that observer self is the one who can both coach and influence the mind to fix itself from all those kind of broken perceptions and reflections of itself that have either been given to the mind, the ego, by the carers or the mirrors or AI increasingly, right? It's like, oh, everything's fine on my Facebook. Well, the world must be fine. No, it's like I've trained the AI to give me only the fine things, right? Children in Africa still dying. There's still loads of like oppression and depression around. It's just that I'm not seeing it in my feed, in my mirror. That's really the nature of the Black Mirror, episodes. That it's the AI that's given us the kind of the dark, which often can be seen as light. It's like everything's fine, but actually that's filtered view. It's like you're not seeing the holistic view of yourself. So talk to me a little bit about that metacognition.
Well, I think in a way it's kind of, we have this potential for the metacognition, right? To kind of like, in a simpler way, to be able to step away from our own thoughts, because we often think that what we think is reality, right? So to be able to take a step away from that, so you're going a level higher, and then you're kind of, it says meta is always like a little bit higher, could be lower, it doesn't matter, but to be able to have an outside look that is not led by beliefs, by emotions, by objectivity, and just is able to have kind of like an overview that should theoretically be pure, unbiased, right? And we all have the potential to that, but I think it's a skill that we need to learn to be able to access that, right?
Correct.
And so probably one of the schools of psychology that is the most tapping into that while not actually speaking about metacognition that much is probably CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, because it teaches you to doubt and challenge your thoughts, right? So let's take an example of your friend in the park is looking for doom, right? So that would be something in CBT that you call selective attention. You have 100 things to be great about, and then he chooses that one bee and says, oh, have you heard of the killer hornets that come from Asia, right? So that is selective attention. And in therapy, you could theoretically learn through psychoeducation, first understanding that it's possible to doubt your thoughts, and then exercises that will help you actually activate that and make that part of your habitual thinking, is to say, take a step back and say, wait a minute. I know that I have the tendencies to do selective thinking, selective attention. Am I doing it now? Yes. Okay, so there's a bee. It's probably not a killer hornet. Second of all, what else is there? And so on and so forth. So being able to have access to that metacognition is, I would say, a privilege that not many of us have, because it has to be taught and it has to be exercised and it has to be understood. But once you have it, you become such a free person, because it allows you to become active instead of reactive towards yourself, towards others. And, you know, it's kind of there. I read this on Instagram the other day, saying that, you know, the problem with being a psychologist and understanding people, or not even being a psychologist, just being very self-aware, being conscious and having that meta perspective, is that you can't get mad at people anymore, because you understand where they're coming from and you understand your reactions to where they're coming from, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like you become very understanding and very zen, because, you know, if someone is barking at you from their car and saying, you can't drive, say, this doesn't have anything to do with me. They don't know me. You know, they're having a bad day and I'm just their outlet. And then if I get angry, because I know I'm being angry because I'm already irritated because I'm coming late and that anxiety, so I'm not going to be angry anymore. So you kind of,
Is there any such thing for like cats? You know, how can I like develop that not caring about the cat going?
It's a question of like, what do you interpret, and how does, and then you have a second, what is kind of like secondary appraisal of something, right? So let's say your cat meows, you're feeling responsible for the well-being of your cat, and because you're on the phone right now with me, you can't do that, which makes you put the pressure under yourself, saying to see. So
it's more like, the way I see that is like this: the cat meows. Mm-hmm. I have a picture of a baby in extremely suffering situations. Mm-hmm. Okay. I associate myself with that baby and the pain that baby experiences, because I'm doing some sort of meta empathy. Mm-hmm. Then I'm aware of the fact that cats evolved over thousands of years to emulate that sound. Then I'm aware of the fact that it's just the sound and the cat has just been fed. Mm-hmm. And then I'm aware of the fact that, still knowing all of that stuff, and that sound is entering my head and is being perceived by my brain as the sound of this baby that's suffering, and that maybe I'm suffering through the baby. And I'm still pissed off that I'm pissed off about that.
Okay.
So the question is, who's the one that's pissed off about being pissed off about something that wasn't real?
Yeah. But then you have to go another meta step. And this is why I find metacognition is so hard to grasp, is because our brains are just limited, and we will never reach that amount of meta that we would need to be absolutely complete, right? So you'd have to take another step and say, what does it mean that you are pissed off about something that you cannot change, right? And about yourself. Mm-hmm. It's probably that you are benchmarking yourself. You should be able to process this information without an emotional reaction, which is a evaluation about your brain's capacity or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And that metacognition will then hopefully maybe allow you at one point to say, my brain's flawed. You know, actually, it's a good thing, because if I ever have another baby, it's not going to be in the next door dying because I'm totally chill that it's crying. It's actually a good thing, you know? So it's all this deeper, digging deeper.
So I think this is what the root of transpersonal psychology is all about, bringing in all that kind of stuff like soul, being, even God, certainly beliefs, all that kind of stuff, metacognition, these kind of things, like being able to hold two completely opposing points of view and not go crazy while doing that. In fact, in integral practices, there are certain practices where we actually look for those seeming opposites to unify them, and to actually
Do you have
go
an
like, well,
example?
I can wear this perspective and wear that perspective, and actually the truth is like in the middle here, which is kind of like, you know, what the sort of the idea of this kind of namaste thing is. It's like it's
Mm-hmm.
somewhere here, right? When you unify the two kind of left right kind of things, then you
Mm-hmm.
get more of a kind of holistic,
Mm-hmm.
which is sort of like the idea of holy. It's like
Mm-hmm.
whole, yeah. So it's like you become more of a holy man or a woman, right? Or even like man woman. So
Yeah.
I, one of the things I was contemplating about, you know, to say, and this is like my dad used to practice this thing, which it took me like decades to understand what he was doing, but he would start every single conversation. I even failed here in this conversation. He'd start every single conversation by showing respect to the other person. Okay. So he would first highlight all the things that he really appreciates about them. And so what I wanted to do actually, and I forgot, but now I remember, I wanted to actually tell you something that is along those lines, which is my respect and appreciation to you, because one of the practices really is to embrace the equal and opposite of oneself, as like man embracing his like feminine side, right? So the way I want to show you my respect to you is that in some sense I see you as like my, like the feminine that I would like to integrate as my kind of feminine sort of person, you know, that would be like my inner guide to healthy living
Mm-hmm.
from the feminine perspective. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of, so if you want to know who's your biggest fan, you can understand that I'm your biggest fan, because I'm like thinking, well, if I want to integrate feminine, who would I want to integrate? And it's like it's really actually tricky to find like role models. I think this is the role of role models in the world. It's like, who would I want to be like on that front? And it's like you start scratching your head, going like, I don't really know, like, because can't really think of someone who is quote unquote perfect. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually see you as the person that is the closest to what I would say is like perfect feminine archetype.
Wow, I truly appreciate that. That is a huge compliment. And
Yeah.
I also wanted to say the way you introduced me, I felt very appreciated. So you did not forget to like show your appreciation. Um,
And I think it's, this is also one of the practices I find that's like, what is it that you can recognize in the other person
mhm,
that is like really
mhm,
something to respect and look up to, even if they're like
mhm,
completely quote unquote broken, right? They
mhm,
might think
mhm.
they're completely broken, but it's like there's still something good to be observed there. Uh,
Yeah.
so, um, so how how do you work on your own self development? Now that I've established that you're perfect.
Okay. I'm like, work on myself. What are you talking about?
Hey, and I'm the interviewer, so whatever I say is absolutely true. So you're perfect. Now that you're perfect, how do you work in your self development?
But yeah, so I think we need to establish that nobody's perfect, and that's wonderful. But I really do appreciate the perspective. Um, I think it was a quite a long journey, and it has really a lot to do with external human resources. So I have been extremely blessed to have a lot of people around me that are really compassionate, mean really well, and have seen potential in me that they have challenged me to reach. And having also the financial means to be able to do that. Because through my life, when you study psychology, you have to go through 30 hours of what's called self discovery. And it's just therapy, right? And I was in
Okay.
my third semester or something, and I went to find my therapist so he could get my signature for my 30 hours. And I'm like, I don't need therapy. I'm like, I'm a potential clinical psychologist. I'm with my friends for years, 4 hours, and I'm like in tears going through things that I hadn't even realized had had that impact on me. right? And over the years, so there will be like 3 or 4 or 5 years where I'm absolutely fine, and then I'll have some kind of a growth spurt or some kind of life challenge, and then I'll go back to therapy. And therapy can be very expensive. So having had the privilege to have people that have the skills to help me make my own path, I think has been crucial to be where I am right now. And I also have a partner of almost 5 years, so in July, 5 years, who is very challenging and demanding of me. And I remember on a date, like we were a year in or something. So some of your viewers might not know that I did 17 years of international modeling. So I was all over the place. And at the same time, I was studying psychology. And then at the end of my studies, I was thinking about doing this company. And we were sitting having a coffee. And he's like, yeah, you talk a lot about your PhD and you're studying psychology and everything. I don't see you doing anything. I'm like, with my tea, like, excuse me? Like, and having that people in your life that you respect to challenge you and say, okay, what are you doing? Like, you talk smack, can you actually follow up on it? Is really important. And I think I've come to that point in my life now where that person should, God forbid, everybody fall away, that challenging, nurturing, compassionate part has grown within myself and keeps pushing me forward. So I see my own shortcomings, and then I kind of decide, is this something I want to work on or not? And I have shortcomings where I'm like, no, I'm fine. I eat way too much sugar. I know it's not healthy. I'm like, it's okay. So that's fine with me as well. And then there's other areas where I say, no, I got to step up, educate myself and work on it. So it's this process of staying curious, finding people who will challenge you, and then also learning that you will come up on your feet, and that sometimes the path that you have in your mind isn't the path that's meant for you. So like there's something that in the Buddhist culture or religion that I find really, really inspiring is the non-judgment, non-attachment, non-reaction. And I really try to keep myself to that. And I think if you follow those lines, you will be healthy and happy. And, so for example, with my company, at 2 points, I thought I had to close shop. I was going broke, we couldn't raise money. This was going wrong. That was going wrong. I said, non-attachment says, did I do my best? Yes. Have I created something beautiful? I would say yes. But if it's time to let go, it's time to let go. And then something else happens, serendipity, but it could have been something else in my life, So I'm rambling, I feel. But
yeah. No, I mean, I've got an example of, a guy that I considered a friend, right? Because we cycled twice from London to Paris, right? Yeah. For charity, all that kind of stuff. And I ended up, through that kind of connection, ended up investing in a startup. I invested like $5,000. And, which for me was quite a lot of money. It wasn't kind of throwaway, but yet it wasn't kind of going to sort of like destroy me if nothing happened. And through sort of circumstances, he ended up sort of miscalculating things and ended up closing shop. And that I was fine about it. It's like I knew I was getting into like a risky sort of investment here, and but he ended up being pissed off with me through because I made some sort of a comment, right, which was around like, I think he deemed it as sort of inappropriate comment. But either way, it's like, you had an investor. I thought you were my friend, irrespective of that. And over some Ponzi, and it goes back to this social media stuff, over some comment, he ended up being pissed off with me and ended up going all the way down to like blocking me and everything, and like tearing away friendship and all that stuff. And I thought, like, it's just like, it's such a like unnecessary thing to do. But it's an example of really kind of that reflects on, there's sometimes you just can't do anything about things kind of falling apart, and that's just that. There's a question around, are Buddhist monks allowed to use email? They are, as long as it has no attachments.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's a joke.
So yeah, you know, this
Oh my
that's
goodness.
really really important thing to remember. Like even Buddhist monks are allowed to do this, but
Mm-hmm.
be careful how you're doing it. And there's nothing I could tell you from a first perspective on like homeschooling two children. There's nothing more annoying than when a school teacher sends an email with an attachment on it, and he's like, it's bad enough that I got an email, now I have to open this thing. It's like, but yeah, so um, what give us like 3 power tips on how to keep social media hygiene perfect.
Okay. First, kind of be aware of what you want from social media. Is it staying in touch with friends? Is it being up to date with news? Is it entertainment? Right? Once you understand that, try to customize your feed. I did an experiment, and you helped with this a while back, where I was getting like lots of political negative things on my Facebook feed. It was just feeding me, and I was going through, and I could feel my blood pressure, like vein poppings out. Like, ah. And so this is not healthy, and it's not adding value because I'm not learning anything new. So I asked my whole friend Facebook groups to only tag me to positive information, to kittens, puppies, or family things that were personal that they wanted to share. My feed completely changed. The problem with Facebook, though, is it always kind of pops in their own little algorithms, and if you scroll through something, they calculate the time you spend, the impressions that you look at it. So you are, even if you're tailor making your feed on Facebook, if you scroll through something negative and you take your time going over it because it catches your attention subconsciously, it will start showing you more of that. So I actually moved away from Facebook to Reddit, right?
Okay.
I can hyper customize my feed. I start my morning with a little bit of news and a lot of like puppies and funny things and wholesome memes, and I'm smiling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So be clear about what you want from social media. The second thing is consume consciously. Be aware of what happens while you read what you do, right? Because if you are into design and you're looking at beautiful houses and you can feel yourself getting sad that you're not sitting in one of those beautiful houses, the goal that you had with following these beautiful houses of learning more about design has not been reached. You're actually harming yourself. Consume consciously, be aware, reflect back, how are you feeling? And then 3, try to moderate your intake, because there is a curve where you reach the tipping point, it's just the right amount, and it's different for everyone, but after that, it actually has a bad effect on your well-being, even if it's exactly the stuff that you have customized your screen to be. Our brains are not meant to be flooded passively all the time. So on average, just kind of like a rule of thumb, an hour a day of social media is more than enough. And to kind of like be able to get off of it, there's lots of applications that help you regulate that, and do something else, read a book, watch a movie, take your dog for a walk.
Yeah. What's the role of like things like meditation and these kind of mindfulness practices in your life? How do you see that as being, what role does that play in actual healthy psychology? Because one of the people I interviewed previously is Sheila from Wild Wild Country, who was like Osho's right-hand person. And I asked her a question of what's the role of spirituality in healthy psychology, because even though she's been through all the stuff that she was like in prison for like quite some time, but served her sentence, all that kind of stuff. She actually runs 2 mental care homes in Switzerland. So she's working with aggressive schizophrenics, living with them. And she says like reality is the best prescription to these people. But I asked her a question of like, what's the role of spirituality in healthy psychology? And she just went straight away. It was like nothing. So that was kind of interesting. But what is the role of this kind of mindfulness practices in healthy psychology? That's my question to you.
Well, I have a very active, what is called monkey brain, Like it's all over the place. It's really hard for me to focus and to calm down. I try, it's not always happening, but I use Calm, the app,
Yeah, okay.
and I do my morning meditation. Um, I think one of the things that is happening now, and that is very exciting, is that we are starting to kind of, we're in the baby steps of psychology. Like we've just barely dipped our toe into psychology. We don't know what we're doing really, right? So now all this new information from neurology and neuroscience and biology and everything is coming together. So we're understanding ourselves better. So meditation is gone from this new age spiritual stuff to actually us being able to prove what it does to our bodies, right? There's something called heart rate variability, and it's and the vagus nerve, and it all has impact on the way our brains function and our well-being. And it's just now absolutely fact that meditating and regulating your breathing is good for your mental health, and it calms you down. It helps you produce less noradrenaline and cortisol, the stress hormones. It helps you focus. It helps with sleep in so many different ways. It's so I don't think we should see meditation as a treatment, but it should be a lifestyle for everyone. And there are so many different types of meditation that there can be a meditation for each and every one of us. And with spirituality, so it really depends, spirituality or religion, right? So there's a lot of research that religion helps take and manage anxiety because you're kind of like passing on all that responsibility to a higher deity. On the other hand, when religion becomes too rigorous and has too many, or it banks too much on shame and control, then it's bad for your mental health. So it's, like you said, it's all about balance.
So I found myself in a very interesting situation because even though I was brought up Muslim and I still consider myself Muslim on that kind of religious front, not even though I'm fasting, for example, this month of Ramadan, I'm fasting, but I don't
Wow.
pray. And it's been fasting this month has been super easy for me comparatively to previous years. But
Mm-hmm.
even though I'm Muslim, I actually got involved with this integral Christianity group that's like more practicing like mystical Christianity and it's kind of mystical meditations. And that helps me because it's like weekly calls, Zoom calls, and it's quite late at night for us, like 2 a.m. it starts. So kind of start at 2 a.m. and finish around 4, which is quite an interesting time to do it at. But we've been doing this mystical meditations that guide you into what's known as the void, okay? Where like Alan Watts talks about, I've seen God and she's black. You get into that, you drop into that void where there is no mind, like there is there's no feelings, no thinking, and all that kind of stuff. And it's really the nothingness, no thing. There is no thing. There's no concept of things either. And so when people say no, you become nobody. Yeah. So when people say nobody is perfect, that's really what Robert Anthony is talking about. You're perfect at that level. That is perfection. And even in the book Effortless Mastery by Kenny Werner, he says, you know, when he guides people through this kind of effortless mastery for playing piano, he's saying in his guided meditations that, you know, if you're not having thoughts, that's amazing. That's like heaven on earth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the perfection that they talk about. It's beyond the mind. It's into the being, soul, and so on. So closing. Yeah, go on.
If I may go into that direction, and I believe, you know, if you go in that direction, that nothingness is actually could be also translated into everything, right?
Correct.
Because, and it dissolves borders. And one of the key pain that comes from people is feeling of disconnect and otherness and adversity, right?
Yeah.
So the understanding that everything is kind of like coming out of the same pot and we all share things that are crucial, be it with a bee, a bird, a whiny cat, or you know, your fellow neighbor that you just can't stand, is a source of strength. And the same technology that is helping us in computer tomographies, being able to see what meditation does to our brains and everything, I think at a later stage we'll be able to prove that we're all connected, and we're able to either visualize it or in another way, like show the streams that are going between people. I know this sounds really sci-fi right now, but just being in the room with your therapist or with your friend or something like that makes people healthier and happier afterwards, right? And I don't think it's just that exchange and the micro expressions and the pheromones and everything, but there is some kind of exchange of something, or a melding of our nothingness or everything that connects us, that makes us, that we need. And we will probably be able to visualize or prove it in, I don't know, 50 years, 100 years, and it will be common knowledge. But right now it seems spiritual, but actually, like, what is spirituality is just unexplained science.
Yeah. And so what we had been experiencing, because I've been practicing with this group, and this is like some people who've been, you know, around the block, let's say, for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of them are like 60 plus in age.
Mm-hmm.
So like 6 or 7 of us, they're like Christian priests and women, you know, so they understand the difference between religion and spirituality and being and spirit and all that kind of stuff. But we'd get into this kind of what they call the we space meditation, right, where you sort of drop the body and even drop the mind and kind of enter that we space where we're connected on that trans rational level, or what they call sometimes astral realm and so on. And then you start hanging around with like Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Muhammad, and all these people, and they're like there as avatars in this astral realm. And to lots of people that sounds like, you know, fantasy and so on, but it's like, then I spoke to Anil Seth, and he did a whole like TED talk, because like which was called "Your Brain Hallucinates Your Conscious Reality." So it's like, it's fantasy anyway. It's like, what are you fantasizing about? Yeah. So that's all quite interesting. So I'm conscious of time, and I can speak to you for hours about this. I think it's been kind of, we've dipped our toes into some fantastic topics. What is it that, okay, I'm just going to close off with this question. Who are you in 25 years' time?
I'm hopefully a jolly, middle-aged, kind woman who is happily doing whatever she's up to.
And what is EQ in 25 years' time?
In 25 years' time, it's probably going to have kind of gone into augmented reality and VR, and will be a realm that we can step into to have affordable therapeutic experience while playing.
And where is humanity in 25 years' time?
Hopefully more enlightened. I like to kind of subscribe to the theory that we're actually growing towards goodness now more than the other way around. So less plastic, less poverty, less pain, more love and compassion.
And one final question. I knew this was gonna, this is fun, because it's like, this is like asking superhuman intelligence, like, you know, like all the stuff that Siri can't answer, you just kind of answer it on the whim. Where is psychology in 25 years' time?
Maybe it's not even called psychology anymore. Maybe it's just kind of like common knowledge or something like that.
Commonology.
Commonology, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think it will be guidelines to ending suffering and positive, living more positively.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Like, I'm going to be like re-listening to this afterwards and going, what does she mean by more positive? Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate and respect you from the bottom of my soul.
Thank you, Jason, for this conversation. And it's always really inspiring talking to you, because there's not very many people who like to dabble in these things, and I always find it very exciting when I get to talk about them. So thank you for offering that opportunity.
Stay perfect.
We'll try.
All right, take care. Bye.